Thank you for joining. Welcome to the Gray Decision Intelligence Demand Trend webinar designed specifically for community college professionals. This is not your average webinar. It's an opportunity to gain insights into labor market data for program evaluation and use data to debunk common myths about community college programs. We do have a few housekeeping items to get started with. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a place called Q&A, labeled Q&A. Please feel free to add your questions there. We will get to as many as we can during the session, and we will follow up later with you if we run out of time. My Gray colleagues and I will be available for chat during the duration of this session as well. You will receive a link to the webinar recording and the presentation slides in the next few days. Please look for it in your email. And without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Bob Atkins, who is not only the founder of Gray Decision Intelligence, but also a program evaluation expert and a best-selling author among higher ed publications.
Thank you very much, Marianne. And thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. I very much appreciate your taking the time out of your days to come and learn with us. So let me share with you what we found out about the demand for higher education programs from a community college perspective for the month of April. Before we get into it, though, I think it's worthwhile to talk about why a program evaluation system. Why do you need one? What is it? So let me start off with that. A good program evaluation system is more than just software. It starts with your mission and understanding what the university intends to do, and therefore what programs it should start, stop, or grow given that mission. It needs to encompass the academic performance of each program so that we can understand whether the program is enabling its graduates to pass exams like the NCLEX that allow them to enter their profession, or achieving the level of success within the institution that one would expect. Do they graduate? What percentage get grades of D, F, or W? And then we've got to look at some sort of hard, more business-like things. Is there a market for this program? Do students want it? Are we well serving our local employers by offering this program? How's the competition? Can we survive that? What are the demographics of the students in this program? And is that the demographic profile we're trying to achieve as an institution? Will it move us towards that demographic objective or away? Because each program has its own demographic fingerprint. Then you've got to take into account margins, not because you're for-profit institutions. I'm sure probably nobody on this phone is. But if you don't have margins, there's no mission. You've got to have programs that generate enough margin to subsidize the small mission-critical programs that can't stand on their own 2 feet financially. That subsidy is fine, but you need to understand your margins in order to know which programs can subsidize other programs and whether the total positive margin is enough to support the total program portfolio and the institution as a whole. So mission, academics, markets, and margins. These are all things where 3 out of 4, you can have hard numbers. 1 specifically requires your knowledge and judgment. Although I will say one of the keys to success here is to bring together the right people and their judgment about the institution, about its local market, about how they should perform and the mission of the institution in the right process that's crisp, but data-informed and participative to make decisions. And last but not least, we've just developed something we call Predict that really is a powerful enabler of this whole process. We can actually give you a very good estimate of how big a potential new program would be at your campus in your market. So when you're trying to evaluate new programs, that most mysterious number of all the numbers you try and put in the business case, how many students are going to show up, we can give you a really good head start on understanding what that number is likely to be. So you put all that together, the data on mission, academics, markets, and margins, you bring together the right people in the right process, and then you can make really sound program decisions. Now, let's take a look at what happens when you do that, and why bother with this. Well-informed program evaluation increases revenue. It really does. One of our clients, as an example, drove up revenue over 3 years in 7 new programs it launched by some $7 million. And that number was still increasing, and that's an annual revenue increase. So over the life of that program, it'll generate tens of millions of those programs. It'll generate tens of millions of new revenue. The second benefit is cost savings. When you do this well, you can streamline, it really is at the course and section level, you can streamline academic operations and save money without having to upset the entire institution, without cutting your program portfolio radically. It's a much more scalpel-like reduction, unpleasant metaphor, but than you often see when people have to reduce cost. They go in and slash programs, often with very little data. Some of the data is actually wrong in what I've seen in studies. And the result is that they lose as much revenue as they reduce cost, and in many cases end up back where they started by a different route, still in financial trouble, having upset their donors, upset the parent community, upset students, and upset everybody in the institution because of the programmatic cut. So there is a smarter way to do that, and you can still save a lot of money. We would advocate that you need to take those savings, if you need to achieve them, and invest them in growth, because that's really where the money is in this process, is finding programs and other opportunities to grow. That's where you can find really millions and millions of dollars. Typically, the cost savings can be much more modest. So let's take a look at what's going on in the marketplace. Student demand, let me share how to read this chart. 2021 is the gray bar, 2022 is the light blue bar, 2023 is that medium blue, and 2024 is the dark blue. So we're hoping to see all these, each month, the years go up and to the right. And in fact, this year we had a break. April is up 10% year over year. During the last 9 months, 8 have increased year over year in terms of Google search volume for academic programs. We had one dip, that was in March, but obviously we bounced back from that, and we're not quite at record levels, but we're getting there in terms of total Google search volume for the keywords that we track for academic programs. This is a very positive indicator looking forward. These folks are looking for programs, are likely to be enrolling in school in the next 6 to 12 months. Now, there is some bad news here, and that is the cost to acquire those students has gone up. The Google cost per click is up 4% year over year for the month of April. Now let's put that in a little bit of context. Fortunately, we're down off on a tied for record last month, $16.09 for a single click. And we're back down in the 15 range, which is more normal for this data series. It was a little worrisome when that seemed to be just ticking up steadily. So I think that's coming back under control. And month over month, we're actually down 7%. So again, that's encouraging, but we've got a little inflation here in the Google cost per click. Google searches for academic programs. What was hot at the US level? Media had 2 entries here, advertising and PR, advertising and applied communication. I don't recall seeing media programs make the top 10 in prior months. Those are new entrants with very handsome growth rates, up 144% for advertising and 81% for PR. Dental hygiene and health programs in general, we got 3 health programs here. That's not uncommon. Dental hygiene up 83%, rad tech up 66%, and surge tech up 52%. Then CTE actually had the largest, that's career and technical education, had the largest number of programs make the top 10, with plumbing up 58%, construction heavy equipment operators up 50%, HVAC maintenance techs up 47%, and airline flight attendants up 46%. And then we had our random entry of fashion merchandising up 72%. And we'll come back to that program a little bit later on in the presentation to see what fashion merchandising majors actually do in their careers. Now let's take a look at what's going on in enrollment. And this is so much fun to present. I've been presenting enrollment charts that were going down for so long, and it's so depressing, and they're not doing that anymore. Certificate enrollment up 3% in 2021 after years of decline, then continued up in 2022, and 2023 we're actually up 5% in certificate enrollment at the community college level. Total fall enrollment for associates has been an even grimmer picture, down a total of 18% between 2018 and 2022. But we're finally turning the corner. Associate enrollment up 1% in 2023. I hope that continues as we move forward. At a minimum, let's hope that the losses have stopped. Now, when we look and see what actually is causing that growth, there's one program here you just cannot overlook, and that's cybersecurity. It's been the backbone of growth in higher ed for a number of years now. Between fall 2018 and 2023, it's grown at an average annual rate of 18%. Right behind that is information technology, up 16%. And finally, in the tech space, we have computer and information sciences up 11%. Now, I say up, that's 11% per year for 5 years. So that's a hefty growth, amount of growth over that period. Now, health only had one entry here, which surprised me. I would have expected that to be more robust. Health information and medical records tech up 9%. Career and technical education did well. Auto body collision and repair up 15%. I don't know if that means we're crashing more cars, or if there's just more interest in that. If we look at fire science, that's up 6%. Commercial truck and bus driver up 5%, and electrician up 5%. And finally, we have a couple of other programs, real estate up 7%, and entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial studies up 6%. This has been trending recently, entrepreneurial studies, so it's one to keep an eye on. Now, if we look at annual percentage growth among associates programs, we get a slightly different picture. Now, of course, cybersecurity still tops the list with 20% annual growth rate at the associate level. Then we have computer science, net tech space, and information technology up 2%. Remember, this whole category of associates is only growing 1%. So anything above 0 is an accomplishment here. And that's why you see such low numbers in terms of percentage growth, even for the fastest growing programs. We've got several healthcare entries on this list. Diagnostic sonography, ultrasound to all of us who aren't in that field. Health services, allied health up 7%. Surge tech up 5%. Rad tech up 4%. Then we only have one career and technical program on this, and that's because it's the associate level. Electrician up 3%. And a couple of more random things, marketing management up 3%. And natural sciences up 3%. Now let's shift over and look at non-degree courses. Many of you are focused on this concept of certificates, not inappropriately. Many graduates, college graduates, may want to come back and get a certificate. Many other folks may want to just get a certificate in a particular thing to add a skill to their resume. And that is probably a positive thing. It's interesting, we're about to do the analysis of that, so haven't done it yet, can't be certain to what extent a certificate demonstrating a given skill really moves you ahead in the workforce. So I'm not saying it doesn't, but the jury's still out. We haven't actually seen the numbers on that yet. So Coursera, I found this interesting. It's actually down 18% year over year. It's been enrolling over 1.5 million people a month, and it's down closer to 1 million now. So there's a little bit of cooling, at least for Coursera. And we'll double check Udemy as well, one of the other big MOOCs. But this could be a share loss by Coursera. That is, there's the same number of people taking these online courses, but Coursera is not winning as many of them. But that big a percentage decline, I suspect there's actually some decline in interest in this sort of program in general. What's growing there? This has actually shifted around. Data everywhere has been in the top 10, but usually down around 5 or 6. The science of well-being has been 1 or 2 for a long time, but here we see it's dropped all the way down to number 7, right followed by introduction to psychology. This has got a lot more technical, a lot more job focused. The top 4 are all very much job focused. Data everywhere, AI for everyone, foundations of UX design, tech support fundamentals. And we see further down more tech, crash course on Python, and data analysis with R programming. Now, in the other category, you have a couple or 3 things. Learning how to learn, almost 270,000 people enrolled. And project initiation, starting a successful project, 230,000 people. And a couple of more health-oriented ones, the science of well-being I mentioned, with over 250,000 people, and introduction to psychology with about 243,000 people. Now, please do keep in mind that an enrollment in one of these courses is not the same as an enrollment in your college. 90%, maybe 95% of these people are going to drop out after they take 1 or 2 classes. Much of this is free. There's no real commitment. So it's just very different, but there's still enormous numbers when you look at how many people are actually taking courses in these online massively open MOOCs. Now let's take a switch over from enrollment questions to look at employment. On the employment side, the first thing we want to talk about is a very widespread myth about what people do after they graduate from college. This is actually the underpinning of much labor market econometrics and a labor market economist point of view. They believe that we should only count jobs for which somebody has been directly prepared. And then they go further to say the jobs for which someone is directly prepared can be determined by people sitting around the table, generally in Washington, to say, here's the jobs that you have studied for. And if you get a different job, then it doesn't really count because you didn't study for that. The underlying problem with that is that there are things people learn that can be applied in a wide variety of fields. To take a trade example, if you study to be an auto mechanic, you've learned how to use a whole set of complex instruments. You've learned how to read a computer diagnostic machine. You understand heating, ventilation, and cooling in a small system. You understand electricity, how it works, and how to manage it. Well, there's a job that requires all those skills, has nothing to do with cars. It's a building maintenance engineer. Now, the HVAC system is different, but the principles of HVAC aren't. Light electrical, yeah, you probably know how to do that. And you can paint, you're good with your hands, you understand how to use tools and so forth. So I could easily see someone taking that degree and going in and doing an entry-level job in building maintenance, where usually what you're doing is not actually fixing things, but recognizing when something is broken, calling a specialist to fix it. By the way, it pays much better than a job as an auto mechanic. But the last time I looked at this, it wasn't counted. It wasn't allowed to be counted by the federal government as a job for which someone had been directly prepared. So to look at this more broadly, if you look at specifically fashion merchandising, one of the fastest growing fields in terms of Google search volume, the mythic direct prep view that comes from the National Center for Education Statistics would say that they're ready to do two jobs, sales rep or wholesale and retail buyer. Now, I do understand why they pick those things. But when you look at what people actually do with that degree, they go into 144 industries and 597 occupations, not two. So that's not a little bit off. They've made the mistake of thinking there are only two things you can do, when in reality there are some 597 things that people actually do with their degree. So what do? They become general and operations managers. They become sales managers. First line supervisors of retail sales. Yeah, that makes sense. They work for a department store. They supervise retail salespeople. They may go into merchandise display. They may be sales reps for services, architectural and engineering managers. That was interesting. I suspect what that really is in that space is doing the interior design part of a project management specialists, chief executives. Whenever you see that in occupational data, keep in mind it's not really a Fortune 500 CEO. That is anybody who is one of the top 5 or 6 senior people in a business. So that could be the owner of a barbershop, for example. I'm a chief executive, but my company is still relatively small. So there are a lot of people who get counted in there because they're business owners who wouldn't have been intuitive to me, and I'm certainly not intuitive to you as chief executives per se. So that's why you see it in the top 10 and actually many, many different occupations. Advertising and promotion managers and marketing managers. So be careful when you're using labor market data. Much of it is based on this NCES crosswalk and the principle of direct prep. That is extremely wrong. And it's kind of funny if you go to the NCES website, what you'll find is they say this crosswalk is not based on empirical data. So that's code for we made it up. Not without thinking about it, but still not fact-based. When you look at the facts, it's not close to being correct. So what is going on with job postings? They're up, and they're actually up 15%. Now, this I would normally think of as good news, but we've been doing an analysis of what drives enrollment in colleges, and rising employment is not a healthy indicator. Enrollment in college picks up when the unemployment rate goes up, and that usually means that job postings have gone down. So while this is good for the economy, and really good for most of us in terms of our personal lives. It's not great in terms of enrollment. So we'll be keeping an eye on this number, and you all should too. It's keeping an eye on the unemployment rate, especially your local unemployment rate, is a very good indicator of what's likely to happen to enrollment going forward. And remember, as unemployment rates go up, so does enrollment, and vice versa. So keep that in mind. It's a very good forward-looking indicator. We just got done back testing it recently. It doesn't explain everything. Don't misunderstand, but it is very highly correlated with college enrollment. So if you're trying to understand what might be happening to you in the near-term future, that's a very good indicator to track. In April, what grew fastest? And industrial engineers had a hell of a day, up 305%. Not as surprising, software developers were up 300%. I find this interesting because this is coming off a decline that took place when Google and the other big boys laid off a bunch of people. So it's good to see this rebounding. It's a very highly paid profession. So it's great to have them recovering. Looking at all the other miscellaneous things on here, accountants are up 60%, preschool teachers up 53%. I'm sorry, keep in mind, these are job postings, not people employed. So job postings for automotive techs up 34%, insurance agents up 32%, and heavy-duty tractor-trailer truck driver job postings up 27%. Second time we've seen growth in this area. It's a very attractive program, actually. You may think it requires capital expenditures. Generally doesn't. You can lease the trucks. So you can get into the truck driving space at very low cost. All you need is a parking lot and some rental trucks from Ryder, and you can be, offer that program. Generally speaking, though, you're not going to do that on Title IV money. That program runs primarily on funds from the Unemployment and Retraining Act. What else? Healthcare had 3 entries here: licensed practical nurses and nursing assistants, followed by our rad techs. We saw 3 times in the enrollment growth as well. So very interesting program, and there appears to be alignment between the growth in the number of jobs and the growth in the interest in it from a student perspective. Which skills are growing across the United States? We hear a lot about skills these days, and appropriately so. What specific skills are hot? Electrical systems, safety standards, point of sale. I assume that's running point of sale equipment, cash registers and such. Mechanics, customer inquiries, handling customers, companionship. I just saw an article today on loneliness. So I suspect this is about our older community and people who can come in and be companionable with older folks, but it may be much broader than that in terms of being a good companion for others in the workforce. But as I say, I suspect that's more tied to gerontology and taking care of our older population. A little bit consistent with understanding vital signs. I'm actually sort of surprised looking at this, how few of the fastest growing skills are actually in healthcare. Refrigeration, 60%, transmission, 56%, and geography, 55%. Now, core skills, these are sometimes called soft skills, but they're very important, and soft tends to demean them. So when we look at this, we've reframed it as core skills. And one of the things people think, I think often, is that the core skills people need to have are the same regardless of their job. That's not really true when you look at the data. What you see over here for marketing managers is the core skills they need are about innovation, management, collaboration, analytical skills, and leadership. These are only the top 5 in terms of growth. If we look at data scientists, interestingly, it's customer service, innovation, that's consistent. Collaboration, yep, that's consistent, but then it's operations and monitoring. So a very different set of core skills depending on which area you're focused on. And many of you are in a position where you have to evaluate whether a given skill is really needed or if it's just something one of your workforce partners happens to be hot about this week. So you can understand that if you have our systems. You can go into job postings. You can look at the specific job postings over time, and you can tease out the word collaboration and see how it's trending over time on the left and where it stands right now. So Collaboration is sought after amongst registered nurses. That makes sense. They're almost always working in teams with other healthcare professionals. Store manager, managing their people. Project manager, intrinsically in managing a project, you've got to collaborate with a lot of people. Farm tech surprised me a little bit more. General manager, that makes sense. Administrative assistant, again, that makes sense. Always working with lots of different people. Observation unit, registered nurse. Assistant store manager, program manager, and finally dental assistant, which I suppose, yes, that too requires collaboration, albeit in a smaller group of people than, say, a program manager or project manager. But being able to collaborate over time would be very important for that because you're working with a dentist and others in the office. So just a little bit of a way to tease out and see whether a skill someone may have mentioned to you is more broadly applicable in the workforce. Now, let's take a look and see how student demand and employment opportunities vary by state. Spoiler alert, they vary a lot. Let's start in Connecticut. The fastest growing programs in Connecticut in terms of enrollment, and only had one program that in common with the fastest growing list that we reviewed for the country a few minutes earlier. And this is not enrollment, I'm sorry, it's Google search volume. So Connecticut's pretty different than the national averages. Phlebotomy was at the top of the list. Licensed practical vocational nurse. And then we have Surge Tech, which was on our other list. But then we go to a bunch of personal care areas. Culinary arts, barbering, nail specialist, esthetician, cosmetology, one nursing, 38% growth in nursing assistant. And then we have electrical and electronics engineering, which was not on our national list. But Connecticut's actually a pretty heavy manufacturing state for high-end electronics. Think of helicopters. The largest helicopter company in the world, Pratt & Whitney, is based in the Hartford area. So there's a pretty substantial electronics engineering requirement there. But again, the main point is you need local data because your state, your local market can be very different from the national averages or even from your state as a whole. What's going on in enrollment in Connecticut? Again, different from our national trend. Associate enrollment, you recall, nationally is up 1%. You see it on the right, actually down 8% in Connecticut. Go. And if we look at US growth on the x-axis or horizontal axis and growth in Connecticut, you can see that the dots are all over the place. What that means is there isn't a very good correlation between growth in Connecticut and growth in the US. Psychology, for example, grew over 10% in Connecticut, grew less than 5% nationally. Marketing management in Connecticut, up over 20%, still below 5% locally. And social work actually was up 25% in Connecticut and saw no growth nationally. So keep in mind, again, just that you need to be keeping track of your local market. One of the ones I found fun here, though, is general literature, up 20% nationally, off a very low base, folks. So don't read too much into that. But still, it's interesting to see that interest in what I would call a non-quantitative, not very work-related area. Now let's shift and take a look at Florida. See how they're doing in the Sunshine State. Total Florida fall enrollment at the associate level was down, has been declining for some time, continued declining, although the pace is moderated in 22 and 23 to just a 2% decline. And as you recall, that's considerably worse than the national average. When we look at program enrollment, the fastest growing enrollment there is cybersecurity. We've actually got 4 programs that overlap with the national average: cyber, computer science, diagnostic medical sonography, and marketing. The rest are unique to Florida: chemical technician, computer programming, biotech, small business management, forensic science and technology. And here's one of the first times I've seen registered nursing make the top 1% in this list. I find that unusual because it used to be towards the top of our list generally. Florida job postings, however, are up considerably faster than the country, which was up 15%. We're up 32% here. Very healthy growth in April, though a bit of a spike. So it remains to be seen whether it'll continue. January was actually down. February is up a little. March was up a little. and then, or excuse me, down a little, and now suddenly got the spike in April. So we'll see how that plays out over time, but it looks a little more promising in Florida, and this month was considerably better than the US average. Job posting trends, again, quite different in Florida than elsewhere. Software developers up 131%, but that was the only IT-related thing that grew in Florida. And as you remember earlier on, there were a number of other things that were growing nationally, whether it was computer science or infotech. Those programs were all growing at the national level, but not here. Not surprisingly, given the age of the population in Florida, see a lot of healthcare in the growth areas, licensed practical nurse, nursing assistants, and dental assistants. Then we have a somewhat random collection of other accountants, preschool teachers, wholesale reps, and real estate agents. And finally, auto techs are up 55% in Florida. What companies are growing in Florida or have the most job postings? This is important when you're sitting in career services and you're trying to figure out, or for that matter, heading a program. You can look this up at a program specific level. Say, who should I be seeking out as local partners? Well, one of the things you want to look for is the folks that have a high volume of job postings, in particular, a high volume of job postings over time. And not surprisingly, the state government, that is the state of Florida, has the most at 101 million, excuse me, 107. Let me get this right, 1,117 job postings. Marriott in number 2. And then we see a lot of healthcare on this list, and in most lists, Orlando Health, University of Florida Hospital, University of, and then Tampa General Hospital, all several hundred job postings each. I wonder if looks like you don't really want to get sick in Florida. They may be well short of the number of people they need to take care of you. And then we have a sort of a random assortment of others, but 2 of the state universities actually hiring in significant amounts. One other thing I'll say about job posting data that's worth keeping in mind, many of you have to do competitive analysis, and or you might like to know what your competition is up to. One of the best lenses into your competition is their job posting volumes. And those are readily available on these labor market data tracking systems, including our own. Look up the competitor. You can see not only how many people they're hiring, which will tell you whether the institution as a whole is growing or shrinking, but what kinds of people they're hiring. And it can be a very good way of identifying, for example, a launch of a new program when you see a person hired with expertise, say in cybersecurity, or some other more cutting edge program. That's a good indicator that the college may be getting into a new space. And if you see growth in hiring in a particular area, that may be a growth area for them. We've run this actually for investors from time to time to figure out whether some of the publicly traded companies are growing or not. And we found that if the best indicator of their growth is actually the change in employment that they have. So it's a really interesting competitive tool. Now let's go a little further north, I believe, into Utah and see what's happening there. Fall enrollment growth smoked everybody else, up 10%. They'd had quite a long decline, not quite as steep as some other places, but they came out way ahead in fall enrollment in 2023, up 10%. Fastest growing, very different list than we've seen. Design and visual communication, number 1, they're up 36%. Airline pilots up 30%. Liberal arts and sciences up to 18%. Then we've got teaching up 18%. Engineering up 13, biology up 13, drama and arts up 12 to 13. And then we have a couple of business ones up 9 and 10. And then coming back, we have fire science up 16%. So very eclectic list, very different list than we've seen so far in terms of enrollment growth. Job postings, very healthy here. Again, up 24% versus a national average of 15%. But like the last one we looked at, a little erratic. This seems to be a 1-month spike. So we'll see whether it persists. And then, it's sort of like, I always look at this and I go, do I have to keep track by state? The answer is absolutely, because it varies by state. And then you dig in and you say, oh, wait a second. It's actually highly varied data within a state as well. So you look at 2 counties in Washington, and you find, in Utah, and you find that the jobs that are popular there, what people are enrolling in, very different at the county level. We got a few that are consistent. General and operations managers, user support specialists, sales reps for manufacturing and wholesale, and first line production, all up 20% or more, and they're up in both sides of the chart. After that, it's a very eclectic list ranging from administrative assistants to registered nurses, HVAC installers, automotive service techs, nursing assistants, and human resource specialists. So you really do need to keep track in your local market to know what's going on and where you can place people coming out of your programs, and for that matter, what programs you may need to offer to meet labor market requirements. What jobs are business administration management people actually going into? This is the largest program in the United States, business administration and management, that is. And in Utah, it's interesting to see what happened to those graduates. In that first 5 years after graduation, this list would get even more eclectic if we looked out further than that. Good news is they studied management. A lot of them are going into management. We've got general and operations managers, some 570, chief executives, 470. Keep in mind that chief executive isn't quite what it appears to be. Managers, 329, marketing managers, 268. We have 3 sales roles: sales manager, financial services sales agents, and sales reps of services, all 250 or higher. And then we have a number of different general business activities, business operations specialists, customer service representatives, and executive and administrative assistants. So let me summarize for you. In April, Google searches for academic programs rose 10% year over year. Advertising actually grew 144%. Fall enrollment in certificates rose 5% year over year. Associate enrollment only rose 1%, but it did turn around for the first time in a number of years. Cybersecurity continues to be the fastest growing program in terms of enrollment at both degree levels, and the job market for that remains healthy as well. In April, U.S. job postings rose 15% year over year, which is great for the country, not great for higher ed. So do keep that in mind. This is a little bit of a warning. If that number persists in being strong, that's likely to hurt our enrollment in the fall. Job postings for industrial engineers rose 305%. I suspect that's a lot of the onshoring going on in the manufacturing sector. In April, job postings with the keyword collaboration rose some 34%. And keep in mind, results vary by state and by county. You do need the data for the particular market you serve. Utah's associate degree enrollment grew 10% year over year versus a 1% national shift. It fell 8% in Connecticut and 2% in Florida. So very widely divergent results by state. And also remember that within a state, it may be quite different from one county to another. So let me take a moment and take any questions you may have. If you'd like, we can even get in and run a program profile for a particular program that may be of interest to one of you. Travis, do you want to fire up your machine to share a program with us? You guys watch out. I'm going to keep going if you're not careful. One thing I do want to say, it's been a subject of I've been studying for a while now, about a year. There's a lot of negativity out there about higher ed. And that ranges from enrollment cliffs, to demographic cliffs, to college isn't worth it, college is too expensive, debt is too burdensome. Almost all of these things are very popular tropes in media. They just happen not to be true. So college really isn't that expensive. Community college especially isn't that expensive. Travis, if you can, why don't you pull up digital marketing? The average college graduate, this is for 4 years, has $30,000 in debt. That's about the same as a car. It's not nothing for sure, but it's not that onerous either. And you'll be using your college education a lot longer than your car will last. And the car, generally speaking, isn't going to increase your income. So, the demographic cliff, from what we can see, pretty thin analytics actually underneath that. There's a very limited correlation between change in population and change in enrollment. I mean, think less than a 10% correlation. What tends to drive enrollment changes is actually the economy. There's a 77% R squared. That is, it explains 70% of the difference, 77% of the difference or change. When you look at the change in the unemployment rate versus the change in the enrollment in college. So most of the change in enrollment in college can be explained by economic factors. Very little is explained by demographics. So if you're worried about the demographic cliff, it's not that you shouldn't be concerned, don't get me wrong, but it very well might be offset by changes in the economy or exacerbated by changes in the economy. And those will have a far larger impact on your enrollment than demographics will. So, Travis, would you like to fire up digital marketing? I don't.
Bob, I apologize, but Travis just messaged me and he's having trouble with his internet. So getting the system to pull up. So I'm pulling it up right now. Just
Terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we'll take a look at one program together. And in the meantime, I would encourage optimism. It will get you further. There are many ways to grow a college, a community college, a small private college, big college, doesn't matter. There are ways to grow. And I'm not making that up. We've looked at well over a dozen colleges and what they've done to grow. And there are repeatable strategies that you can take advantage of if you have the intellectual flexibility and a little bit of money to implement those things. So I would encourage you to go seek those out, look at peers, and we'll be keeping you posted on growth strategies as the research gets completed and I write it up. But there's reason to be optimistic out there. The numbers we're seeing here are going up finally. And we do need to adapt and we need to implement growth strategies. But there's no reason to believe that the situation is out of our control. We're not going to be victims of a demographic cliff in all likelihood, though we could get clipped if the economy picks up and the unemployment rate drops. Are you ready?
Yeah, I apologize. I had a little bit of
problems.
System issue here. There we go.
I'm going to actually drop out. I'll do it myself. And I'll have a race. Whoever gets there first.
I apologize. I am moving slow. There we go.
I think our computers are on holiday vacation already.
I know. There we go.
You in?
I think so.
There is always the plan B of Bob singing show tunes until we get it running.
Well, I almost feel like I want to slow down just for that to happen.
No, you don't. You really don't. I gave up singing in high school and I didn't hear anybody complain about it. So I did once have a solo. It was 6 notes long. And I one time hit each of the 6 notes correctly. But in all the rehearsals and everything we did beyond that, nope, didn't get there. Market, I'm going to pick national. And you'd have the option as a subscriber to see when I do this right. I'll pick a rubric first. This is a scoring rubric.
Let's see.
So I'll do.
I've got mine up. I don't know if you can see
fire
it.
away then.
Okay. So yes, I'm at the national level and I have the award level of associates and below at the national market. And looking at digital marketing, it's, at very first glance, we're at the 86th percentile across all of the metrics. And so as we dig in,
Percentile in this case, percentage of what?
what's that? The percentile is going to be in comparison to all other programs at this award level in the national market. So that percentile could change if we change the market that we have selected. So this is across the nation then. So in comparison to all other programs, it's scoring very highly.
And that's about the 86th percentile is one of the top 14% of, I think it's what, about 1,400 programs that we keep track of.
Yeah. And so you can see as you dig in and to see why it's scoring that way. Student demand is scoring very high, again, at the 94th percentile. And in our value of 200, over 290, almost 291,000 Google search in the last 3 months. In perspective, that's in the 94th percentile. We can see our size for current completions and new student enrollment stays high. And then our growth trajectory still in those areas of Google search, enrollment, and completion are all on the growth and high marks in comparison to other programs as well.
Mhm.
And then as we look at competition of offering this program, you can see that it is a more competitive program and that there's 26 campuses that are offering this. And there are no institutions that are offering it online across the nation.
That's surprising.
I thought so too. Yeah, for digital marketing especially.
I'm a little concerned too. The median program completion is actually very low.
I thought, yeah.
So that indicates that this is probably quite a small program at most institutions. I would have expected it to be quite a bit larger.
And I wonder if it's because of the award level that I have it offered at, is where I wanted to look at what it's actually being completed.
Yeah, it's mostly a certificate.
Yeah.
Can all of you see that if you look at the certificate level, award level, completions are almost all at that level. Enrollment is predominant at that level. And educational attainment in the workforce actually is much higher. Workforce educational attainment is more like a bachelor's degree, probably with certificate tacked onto it.
Yeah.
How are jobs?
Well, when we're looking at this, and I'm wondering if, and Bob, I'm going to go to your expertise on why it would come up like this. Is it because of looking at the educational attainment and where they're actually working that this rubric that I have selected is not bringing up the data?
I'm not certain why that's taking place, actually.
Okay.
I wonder if we could look regionally, though the story may not be much better, but for Southern California.
Okay.
No, that's not a selection. California is, but it's not going to get. Let's pick a different program.
Okay.
Is there another one that we'd like to look at? Southern California, Danelle, is not one of the pre-selected geographies, so we can't zoom in. We could look at California on it for a given program, but SoCal's not separated out. If we set up a system for you, we could absolutely do that, but not real time. We only do in the real time. We'll only do national. Let's put it that way. Should we look at something like accounting or bookkeeping?
Sure. Do we want to do the bookkeeping and accounting together,
I
or?
think that's more relevant for our
Okay.
audience today.
Okay, so and looking at this scorecard, you see at first glance the dark green, meaning that it is a strong program across the top percentile in the 96th percentile. Again, across the nation at the associates level. Student demand is coming in very high at 98th percentile. And I like to see not only the size, but then are we continuing that trend on being high in the size? And it looks like the growth has dropped a little. Or no, it just hasn't grown as rapidly as the other programs. It's still staying in a strong program.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at these numbers. This is sort of like your funnel. Google search is down a little bit. That's very forward-looking. That's the people who are thinking about going to school. Enrollment is what's happening more or less right now. That'll be fall enrollment numbers up 6%. So that's pretty healthy. And completion volume is actually a measure of what happened several years ago when people enrolled in this program and are now coming out the other end. of the pipe and completing. So that's flat. I would say I'd be a little more concerned about the future, but 3% is not that big a change. Certainly the current enrollment is strong. So this would make me relatively comfortable, though I would be keeping an eye on that Google number to see if it shifts
Yeah.
and continues to be negative over time.
And then looking at the completions, and again, this is interesting at looking at the median completion size, especially with the number of completions that it reports. But it is across the nation, so it is a very competitive program with over 800 institutions that are offering this program.
A little on the small side.
Yeah.
Do keep in mind a completion is not a student. Typically, we're going to be looking at something where there's a couple of years of students involved. So, something like twice as many students in the program as would complete. In a 4-year program, that'd be more like 6 times as many students.
Right. Okay. And then you can see your percentage here of how many of these institutions across the nation are offering it online.
Mhm.
So there is that opportunity as well.
Pretty popular, actually, online. That 39-40% as a percentage of completion is actually a very high number.
Yeah. When looking at employment,
Lots of jobs.
yeah.
Whether you look at job postings or current employment or BLS job openings, all 99th percentile, very healthy numbers. Growth rates are good. And job postings per graduate are good. They're not fabulous at 1.5. Job postings per graduate 1.3, but they're good. I've seen those numbers range to 4 and 7. Get into nursing, and you're going to see numbers that are up at around 4 in many markets and sometimes higher. Wages are only okay. Not surprising for bookkeeping, but still. They're bottom third in terms of how they compare to other programs.
Yeah.
So, and then it
Yeah.
skews female.
What's that?
It skews female.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Interesting.
And then I like to look at that. This is my favorite chart, is looking at the actual where people are working and what their level of education is at.
Yep. And mostly certificates and some associates, well, a good slug of associates. Educational attainment of people who do this job, many of them actually have no college or some college. Between the two of those, we're at 54%. So interesting. They'll make that 64%. So this is a field people can get into without having to have a full degree. So that makes that certificate pretty attractive. Associates and bachelors, 13 and 9%, 19% respectively. And then at the top there, you can see our cost benchmarking information. We keep track of what it costs to teach this at some 50 institutions. And it is a scale where 1 is an average cost of instruction. So we can see this one is actually quite a bit below average in terms of cost to teach. The cost per student credit hours at the 59th percentile, and the median cost per student is about the same at the 60th. So it's an inexpensive program to teach compared to others. Let's stop there. If there are others, please feel free to get in touch with us. We'd be glad to walk you through and show you another program that may be of interest to you at the national level. Thank you all very much. Now, let me remind you that there are lots of other things that we give away. And we've got webinars coming up shortly that we'd be glad to share with you and keep you up to date on what's going on in the community college sector.
And I want to thank you again for joining us. I did put a poll up there for you. I appreciate any feedback that you can give us so that we can evaluate and improve and get you what you need for the next webinar.
Thanks again. And all this can be downloaded if you'd like.